I'm excited to be doing another teardown. This time my guest is Riley. Riley, would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hi, Vicky. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Ralitsa Minkova, or Rally for short, and I'm an email strategist and conversion copywriter for brands that dare to care. And that's the simplest way I can put together my focus on customer-centric messaging. And I think today's example is going to be just that.
I love it.
Oh,
Fabulous.
thank you.
I'm going to share the email that you've kind of chosen for us to walk through today. Can you tell me a bit about the brand and how you came to be on their list and why you kind of picked this email out for us to look at?
Absolutely. I was on a hunt for brands that were using quizzes, and I landed on Sundays for Dogs. I had a dog, so I love brands that bring me closer to dog-related things, and it's always nice to see brands that do things a little bit differently compared to others in terms of style and tone. So I took the quiz, and just as a way to see what kind of emails they would be sending my way. And I've stayed since, and it's been more than a year now. This email came in my inbox in between some of their other more regular e-commerce emails, which you're probably familiar with, where, it's buy this product or that. And it stood out because it's leading with one of the cutest corgis around, Maxine, and she's a superstar for those who didn't know. I didn't know that either until I started looking a little bit more into who Maxine is. And it's such a fun way to make the brand more personal and more approachable, which is something that both goes into the name of the brand, Sundays for Dogs, which is unique, I think. And also the whole design and how it leads the reader down a path. I could talk more about this, but that's basically the way I landed.
I'm already
on their
excited
list.
about this because there's two things you said about that made them stand out. And the first is that whole quiz element, which is such an interesting way to build lists that actually not a lot of people do. Like you said, you had to go on a hunt for them. Like you and I as kind of strategists, we've got that in our mind kind of, oh, this is a really cool way to bring people in. But equally, like not a lot of people are doing it. So that kind of sets them apart, which I think is really interesting. And having that data on the answers that you gave them, I guess that feeds into a lot of then that, the content they send you, hopefully, if they're using it correctly. Which I yeah. And I love as well that when you pointed out that Maxine here, because having that kind of another thing, like if you don't have a face for your brand, using the pet, using Maxine as that kind of face of the brand is again something quite different and stand out. So already, like just from this header bit and this small bit of information, it feels like a really strong brand that they've built.
Mm. Actually, I think the more I was looking at this email and looking into how it's structured and who Maxine is and what the CTAs do when we're going to look at the email towards the end, it felt a lot more, it felt less as the face of the brand and more a dogfluencer stepping in to talk about Sundays for Dogs. Which is if that's the case, I don't know for sure, but if that's the case, that's a really novel way of building in the influencer sort of approach to emails, which you typically see only or mostly on Instagram, where you have dog accounts or famous dogs or cats showcasing brands that they partner with. But in this case, again, I don't know if that's the case, but if it is, it's just brilliant because it feeds directly into the kind of messaging Sundays for Dogs leads with, and it just makes it so much more fun and enjoyable to get in your inbox.
100%. And I've got so many of the questions I have for you on this email asking, coming at it with that angle of, because I know you do a lot of work around design and copy. And so, yeah, my first kind of questions are around this banner image and kind of your thoughts on that. It used to be that we were taught logo at the top, and then you have kind of your image, then you have your header and your subheading. And that's not necessarily the structure that you see in all the emails anymore. Like things get moved around here. And this one's almost like that header is part of the image, and then it's almost like not a letter, but you know what I mean. It's kind of like the greetings from Maxine.
Yeah.
So I'd love your thoughts on kind of, how that's kind of developed and how they're using it here.
I think it's very strategic because when you scroll down the email, you'll see that the logo suddenly at the end gets much larger compared to here. Here, the focus is on Maxine. She's the superstar of this email. She's the person, not the person, but the dog sending you the email. And it's built in such a way as if it's unraveling those myths around dog food, frozen dog food, which the whole brand is around. It offers air-dried food, nutritious food for dogs. And when I had my dog, I never knew that raw food was a thing. Right now, there are many brands who offer that. And it's just, you get more educated or you learn more, the more you're getting around brands that offer that kind of product. There are other brands that have other kinds of products that you could argue that there is a little bit of the whole problem with what kind of food to choose for your dog is built around all those myths. And this is exactly the kind of email that tries to to dispel those myths and shed some light on what is actually good for your dog and how to go about it from the perspective of an actual dog, which adds that sort of lightheartedness in the email with those little touches of fun snippets that just make it so much more, I would say humanized, but I guess that's not the right word when it's coming from, supposedly coming from Maxine. But just the fact that she has that kind of handle, Mad Max Fluffy Road, which for any fan of Mad Max Fury Road, you immediately make the connection. She's just adorable, and it just ties perfectly with what the email is going to be about. It catches your attention, and the best part is that the images that you'll see here, they have alt text compared to most other emails that are just image based. So there's that.
Interesting. Yes, I love that you've looked at that. That's definitely like the email marketer brain going into it. So if we come down and see some of these elements that you've kind of touched on, so almost like the message from the email intro, the messages from Maxine, and I do like the little, almost like she's got her own signature block there, like you said, with the Instagram handle and everything in. Then the call to action, I might come back to that one because I do want to come down to the bits that you were just touching on, because here we've got kind of like the myths busted that you said. And I think this is a really clever, I love that you said that they got the alt text in. I think it's a really clever balance of images and what I'm assuming is kind of the live text in there. So I'm assuming they've kind of used live text for the kind of their subheadings and the body text, because obviously if those images don't load, then you've still got enough there that you could read it and know what was happening. But quite clever that they've kind of got, I know that myth one there is obviously like a small image, but to have that kind of set out and the different sizes of like the subheading and the body text, they're clearly quite different. So it feels really well laid out.
Mm-hmm. You can immediately see the visual flow, like what is the first thing that you're going to notice, and what is the second and the third, and that is usually done. The easiest way to do that is with font sizes, just like here. You have a clear headline, myths busted, with busted being in italics, which also helps to bring that forward. Then you have the myth one, which is treated as if, I don't know if you remember those old folders where you would have those printed out, those kinds of letters on top of folders.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is exactly, it's kind of like a detective going out and
Yeah.
revealing the truth, essentially. So it's styled very carefully. It's almost like a lot of emails that win people over are story driven. And here you don't just have the first letter part of Maxine, which immerses you into the narrative, but also you have the visual treatment, which supports the messaging in such a good way. And even those smaller images with the chickpeas and the cooker there,
Yeah.
they also have alt text, which we could argue that you could maybe explain the image a little bit more, but when you disable images, you don't miss anything from the email. You still get the message, you still read everything, and that's the whole point, because if you don't have internet connection or you have a disability and you are not able to read this email, you would still be able to, it would not interrupt your experience in any way, and that is the key part.
I also really liked that there's almost enough information here as well without being too copy heavy. So it feels like they've thought about, okay, how do we get that balance with the images as well? And then, yeah, small amount of copy and the images. And then we've got kind of the box test. I'm a big fan of like a boxed text or a boxed image. So I quite like this contrast down the bottom, because that's then they kind of dispelled the myth, and then here's what's in ours, I guess is what they're saying. So this is why ours is different. And that felt like a big contrast at the bottom here.
That would be the only section I would pick a bone with. Actually, because it's image based, and the only thing you would see is the sniffed, sampled, and approved by yours truly. And yours truly, obviously, is Maxine, Dr. Maxine. She's the resident dog food scientist. So the tricky part with this is that the way you see it here, it's the similar way that it's going to appear on mobile as well. So it might get a little bit tricky,
Right.
and since everything is centered with the previous section, the image leads again with that kind of treatment, but the tick marks perhaps would be easier to read if they were on a single column, either left or right, so that it just makes it easier for the eye to go through them, because in 3 lines you don't really know what to focus on. So but then again, you would have the challenge with where would the image go and how would you structure this differently, because that is not live text. But other than that, that's a small thing compared to everything else that we see here.
I love speaking to someone like you, that kind of that instantly, like you said, as soon as you said that it's quite difficult to read in a list like that, my brain went, yeah, it does look quite pretty with these tick boxes, but you're right, actually, if I try, I almost have to lean in a little bit just to kind of read them. So yeah, it's that thinking through that practical side of it as well, and the mobile side, rather than just, it looks quite nice having a tick box, the little ticks, because they go quite well. Absolutely.
There is another way to go about this, and I think if we have time for another email, it might trigger some ideas, because they've done it in a sort of different way, but the problem there is a little bit more, it's a little bit bigger, because with alt text and all of that missing, you cannot even see what's on the image. So another way to treat this would be to keep the image centered and then have all those check marks around it. And that would solve the problem of the spacing, and it would still keep the design as is, since it is an image-based section.
Amazing. Yes, we will come to that hopefully in a second, because I would love to compare. Then button, I quite like. I do like the full width button. I'd like your thoughts on those. Do you like a full width button?
I think an email is good, because whether I compared the two, the email both on desktop and on mobile. And for mobile, it's easier to tap because it's larger, so you don't have any issues with where's the button? And desktop too, it doesn't take away anything from the design. And for me, the most important part is that it really stands out since it's placed on that on-brand yellow that they have going on, this really radiant, bright color. And it's just giving a good visual contrast where you don't have to look for the button. It's immediately there and it's very prominent. So I think it works well here. If it was shorter, if it was a little bit not so wide but narrower, you would have then the empty spaces around it, which I would maybe question, or it could allow more breathing room in some cases, especially if everything around it is crowded. But in this case, I think it's fine because you also have the lighter image above, and then you have the spacing underneath. So it feels balanced to the eye.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. And then we've got another, almost like the PS and the PSS at the bottom here.
Yeah.
Which I do think is cute. I like that they've brought in those, like you said, those almost those labels. They've kept that consistency throughout on that section.
This is a GIF actually, and it also has alt text. So that is also something that not everybody does with GIFs. I don't know if it's an ESP issue, but it helps to add the alt text on GIFs as well, because then you can describe the image so that it tells you what it is.
So is the dog there on the right a GIF? Is the I was about to say header, but it's not. But that green section at the bottom, is that
too.
Like a scrolling GIF as well?
I don't know if it's a GIF. I think it's animated text. I haven't inspected it, but that's something I missed. But it is everything you see, like the human grade that formulated. All of that text is actually alt text as well. So if you remove the images from the email, you would still read it. And you would also see the alt text for the GIF with Maxine.
Because I've been seeing that scrolling text more frequently recently. So I wonder if that's kind of a trend that's going. Because I quite like that. I like that they've got that animated with the GIF and then the scrolling text at the bottom there. Because a lot of people put everything at the top, so it's quite interesting that they've got those kind of almost those moving elements down the bottom to kind of make it more interesting when you get to that section. I think that's quite a good approach.
It also creates a really visual treatment, because with everything being light above that and then you end with something darker, it again creates that sort of rhythm for the eye to follow. Which then the small S for the logo appears underneath with a big value prop, which is a lot bigger than the initial logo that you spotted in that header image. Yes. So it's one of the most, I'm careful not to use subjective words, but it is one of the most beautiful emails I've seen in a long time. And the fact that it's designed in a way that's accessible also just gives me really good vibes and all the bonus points for Maxine and for Sundays.
This footer as well is so tidy. Like usually people just the bottom of the email can be just like people know that I need to put in my unsubscribe link. I need to do that. So when I see people do something like this with a footer where they've obviously thought it through, and they've always got like you say the logo, and then they've got the menu. Yeah, really good use of space, and you come away feeling like you said, it's beautiful, which is really like strange. It feels like a strange thing to say about an email, but you're doing like it's so consistent throughout. And I know I did skip over the kind of the 50% here because this is the bit that I think I had the most questions on, and kind of the reason being was I don't know. It almost felt a little bit out of place where it was. I don't know whether you got that feeling or whether you quite liked it here. I think I really obviously I like the offers, like a huge offer of 50% off your first order. I've got no qualms with the design side of it, but it was just kind of like the email itself, I don't know whether it felt like it was in the wrong place or whether it needed to kind of have almost like that box section up here.
I actually found it strange to have the save 50% being so big. But then if you consider the fact that it's not a separate box, but it's just text following the signature of Maxine and her call to stay fluffy, it just leads with the generous discount. It's a big discount. Most brands won't really give you such a generous discount when you haven't made a first order yet. But the fact that it's just in text and it's still it's prominent, but it's also not calling out too much attention because there isn't anything around it besides the Shop Now button. I kind of liked it. It's daring, and it's also, I think it also works for anyone who maybe doesn't really need so much convincing about why frozen food is not as good as most people think it is, and why air-dried fresh food might be a better option, which is Sundays. For those people who don't really need so much convincing, taking the discount with the Chong 50 is just brilliant. And if you made it smaller, I think it would just get lost in between the vivid yellow color that comes underneath.
Yeah. And I think actually, yeah, my thought was, okay, well, maybe I would have made that this PS down the bottom, but actually, yeah, chatting it through, I wonder if you're right. Maybe some people won't need that convincing. So, okay, yeah, let's just go straight in. Here's the offer if you want to get to it. And the other thing I love, I've been seeing a real trend of this having copy underneath the buttons in a smaller font. There's a couple of brands. There's one called Happy Mammoth. I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, but I've seen a lot of brands doing that. They're putting their almost like their T's and C's, or like here they've got free shipping and like the extra kind of hooks almost like right there underneath the button, which I quite like.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because it sounds like you're fascinated by this new addition, or the thing that you're seeing more recently.
I think it's really clever because, and actually I don't know, like I personally haven't done it yet, but it's something that I'm thinking, this is like this is one of those trends where I'm like, oh, I actually might start doing this, because I think what it is those buttons, like this button stands out so well that your eye is drawn to it. So you almost kind of like having that free shipping and 40-day money back guarantee, like that right there with that button feels like that's almost like goes alongside. So that's what you see. Often it's like those extra perks might be somewhere else in the email, or, come in the PS or whatever it is, but having them next to the most prominent bit of the email feels really clever. So I think that's why it is that I'm quite drawn to it. And I don't know why we haven't been doing it before. Like I say, it's something I've not noticed until recently.
It almost seems like the website treatment of what you usually get in opt-in forms, for example, the microtext underneath the disclaimer text or any kind of extra information, just like you said, it's being brought to email. And I think it's really not been done so much in the past, but it immediately sort of takes away some of the pressure or the stress that might come with clicking through and not knowing where you land. Because in most cases, you would probably see this only when you go to the product page and then you add something to cart. So 100%. I think I agree with you that it's a really brilliant way of treating it from the email.
Yeah, I think, like you said, usually there are things on the product page or something that you're trying to shoehorn into your copy, when actually this is a nicer way to almost to kind of to display it or to make it more prominent. So yeah, I'm glad that you are a fan of it too. Right, I am going to stop sharing this one because we are going to hop into another email that you've brought along so that we can just look at it alongside Sunday's email. And this one I believe you were saying is from one of their competitors.
Yeah, this is a raw food brand called Mave, and they are. If you look at the email and just the copy, and even if you compare the websites, you will immediately sense a completely different vibe. This almost feels like more serious or more um, banking on the scientific side of things, and leading with even the image that you see here with the microbiome in the bottom of the screenshot, or in the center now that you're scrolling up down. It's just a lot different compared to the sunny vibes that you get with Sundays, and the vibrant colors, and the sort of voice even of the brand behind it. And this is exactly what I was talking about earlier, what I was referring to, having the image in the middle and then leading with those little lines slightly at the bottom, yeah, where you can add features of what the brand is. The one with the bowl, yeah.
Kind of course. Yeah, I think you can immediately see the alternate way of doing it.
The other thing that's interesting in this email is that everything is image-based. And I know that is always a pain point when you also break down emails. And it's just sad.
Because I was a bit like this one with the microbiome. I was like, I like the way they've got that list there. But then in my head, I was like, how is that working? Yeah, is that an image? Yeah. So is that kind of section there? That's all one image. Okay. Yeah.
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 And the other part with that particular section is that you cannot really see the text that is overlaid on the image, because it's so close. When you make it black and white, the entire image, you can just see that even the CTA button is getting lost. There isn't enough visual contrast. And that is also, I think, a big pet peeve, I would say, when it comes to brands using their brand colors across the board. And it makes sometimes for a not so pleasant viewing experience, email experience, and it can even hurt accessibility as well, because if you can't read what's on top of there, even if you don't have alt text, it just kind of messes the experience. But I did like the image with those little lines leading, and just compared to Sundays where you had the checklist check marks in the three liners as a three liner in the image. This approach would work very well with Sunday's email as well.
We've got the like the review here. I always love those in email. But again, now that you've told us it's all email all image based, I'm like, no, that's kind of instantly again, kind of I can see now as we scroll through this why Sundays was so clever with that balance of live text image, whereas this, yeah, is very, very image based.
It would be great if the text was at least placed as alt text, so then you would at least have that when you wouldn't be able to see the images. But even then, when you place a light text, this kind of light font on top of a light image, it's not really readable. It creates a little tension, or maybe a lot, when you try to read it. So just darkening that bottom part of the image could help the review stand out, if nothing else. But yeah, sometimes it's hard. It's easy to make something look pretty in an image, but then it takes a lot more effort to create it as an email with live text. Yeah. So,
and I 100% get that angst and that thing that some brands have, and I imagine especially in like some brands where there might be, you know, the bosses or whatever saying, oh, it needs to look a certain way, and actually then, you know, that's why sometimes then people end up kind of going to that kind of, okay, well, we'll create it as an image. But to your point, there's creating images, and then there's creating images that actually are visually accessible. Like here, you know, they could have done a better job with making that testimonial stand out so that people, like you say, there's not that friction and people can read it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's still an interesting email though, and it still reflects their brand, the visual aspects. Like if you go to their website, you get the same aesthetic, and it's very clean and minimalistic as well. Their logo is also very prominent in most of their emails. I think, especially at the bottom of the footer,
They got it.
it's a
Oh
little bit
yes, yeah.
smaller. But then you also have that huge, that huge text at the start, where you also have this sort of weird cropped, not cropped, but where the verb is on its own line.
Yes.
So that was something that really caught my eye as well, and I was wondering, is it really like this gap and this white space that is there between the ultra processed? I mean, immediately you notice the ultra processed, which is the whole point, and you're calling that out. But
Yeah.
it just made me wonder if that's the best way to go about it, if it's intentional. But there's a lot of minimalistic treatments throughout their emails in general. So it's very different compared to the warmer sort of, again, sunny vibes, what I would call it, for Sundays for dogs.
Yeah. Yeah, I am. I'm all for left aligned, but that does feel that is definitely looks like it shouldn't be left on its own just here. But overall, yeah, you can, even for the short amount of time we've spent on this email, you can feel the vibe is very different.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the CTAs here in this particular email. I don't know if you've noticed anything or if they feel too close to you compared to, for example, Sundays.
This is, oh, you put me on the spot here. I like this. First of all, are they images? I'm assuming they're images because they've got the little arrow in there. I would have thought they are, which I'm not a big fan of. I do think all buttons should be, kind of buttons rather than images.
Mm.
I'm just gonna look back at Sundays. Bear with me a second.
Mostly my question is whether, I guess my question to you is whether you think an email should lead with only one CTA compared to mixing different CTAs.
I think it comes down to the purpose of the email. Often when I'm doing segmented or automated emails, I'm very focused in, okay, this is the message of the email, so we're doing one call to action, and I'll be quite conscious of that. With Sundays, they do have that switch and that shop now, which are effectively the same thing. They're basically come and shop. They felt quite natural for the content of the email, so that if the purpose was to educate people so they switch, that felt quite natural. Here, it's kind of feels more like they're teaching. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. I'm not a massive fan of the calls to action in this one.
I have to agree. And it also throws me off visually that the first CTA button is left aligned, just like the headline and the text, but then you also lead with the centered. And this is one of those instances where it's usually you'll hear that you need to keep things consistent, but sometimes you need to break that rule when it doesn't really make sense to keep it.
Yeah.
And it just throws you off a little bit. Maybe that's intentional though, I don't know. But in terms of the CTAs, I would have to agree. What I found interesting in Sunday's email was that they tucked a completely different CTA at the very bottom, that bottom of the email, that other PS that Maxine was talking about. And it leads you to Maxine's actual backpack for chunky doggos. So that was unexpected because it doesn't have anything to do with the actual email where it tells you to switch to Sundays and to use that code to buy to get the 50% off. But it also leads you to another path where you can find out more about Maxine herself. And that's how I realized she was actually a superstar. So it was interesting, but it's not something that is prominent. It's only for those who would go at the bottom of the email, and it doesn't distract from anything else in the email.
And I think the reason I maybe had a difficulty like saying what I thought about the buttons here is they're not particularly compelling. Whereas everything we just looked at in Sunday's email and everything that we've kind of spoken about, like the tone of voice and the kind of the myths and the way they've done that with the little labels, like all of those tiny things, even though their call to actions are quite similar, they're like switch or shop or what have you, they almost feel like they don't stand out because they feel like the whole email and the whole tone of the email is more compelling. Whereas this one, because it's, I don't know, maybe their tone is a bit more educational and it's about learn more and it's more kind of, it didn't grab me as much, so I wasn't naturally kind of looking at the call to action because I was like, it's not making me want to look at the calls to action.
Yeah.
Which I think is testament to what you said about why Sunday's email is so clever. And then they can do things like you just said. They can put in a random call to action and it doesn't feel weird. It doesn't feel like, why is this here? It's because they built that brand and written those emails so that their calls to action feel kind of part of it.
I think you're spot on. And with something so personal as having a dog and caring for it and wanting the best for its nutrition and just being a good dog parent, as most people who have dogs or cats would call themselves. And that's usually the angle that most brands lead with when they write any kind of copy targeting dog parents or cat parents. I think when you look at this email, even though it hits on those factual points where it can tell you a little bit more about why you should care about dog food being ultra processed, and that is a really big issue. The comparison between this email and when you go to their website and you're hit with a really emotional white picture of somebody with their dog, it just becomes a little bit of a contrast, and it makes me wonder if that kind of emotional aspect could be brought into the email as well, so that you can sense that from the testimonial that they've included, where you have the dog getting food with the human hand. So those little touches, but when you see the bowl alone or when you see just the product essentially presented, it takes away some of the soul behind it.
I've really enjoyed speaking with you on these emails. I could chat to you forever. Could you tell us a little bit of where people can kind of find you online if they want to kind of come and learn more from you?
Absolutely. It was a pleasure being here, Vicky. Thank you for inviting me. You can find me on LinkedIn, Ralitsa Minkova. There are not a lot of people with that name around, so that's one thing. And for anyone interested in learning the basics of design, mostly copywriters, you can find me at Design for Copywriters. And that's where I usually geek out over design things.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Raleigh.
Thank you so much for having me, Vicky. It was a pleasure.